So Ed, are you able to get out on any of the rivers and lakes around there, or is it too much water?
Great. It is 3:20. If we could have our members raise their hands. Thank you. Thank you. Everyone, a few seconds. Great. Our next session will be on Endangered Species Act activities and state workshops. We are joined by Amy Blankenship, Director of the Environmental Fate and Effects Division, Brian Anderson, Deputy Director of EFED, Ann Overstreet, Director of the Pesticide Reevaluation Division, and Kim Brown from the University of Tennessee. Welcome. Amy, are you there? Or Brian?
And then
Perfect. Oh, you're muted. Still muted.
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me
Yes,
and see me?
yes, yes. Are you good on sharing your slides, or do you want me to do it? Okay, Brian's gonna do it. Perfect.
Do you want me to turn on my sound? Yeah, I'm not sure if folks can hear me or see me. Give me a thumbs up or a
Yes, we can hear you, Amy.
sign if you can hear me. Okay, thank you. Right. So Jeffrey, we ready to go whenever you are?
Yep, we're ready.
Maybe we lost Jeffrey.
Can can you guys hear me?
Are you sharing or who's sharing? Sure. Would you mind putting, can you, if you can you put it in presentation mode? Thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. I'm in the same room. I have Brian Anderson here and Ann Overstreet with me. So we're just getting everything loaded in. There we go. It makes it a little bit bigger for folks to be able to see. And so Brian and I are going to start off this session. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of the insecticide strategy that was finalized at the end of April. And then Brian's going to spend a few minutes talking about all the efforts that we are doing, largely in coordination with other folks, a lot of them on this call today, about helping to refine some of our listed species core maps using the guidance that we issued last year. So Brian is running the slides for me. Do you want to go to the next one? All right. So the insecticide strategy. So what is the goal of the insecticide strategy? So it's the same as is with the other strategies. We're trying to reduce population level impacts from fish and wildlife species, from conventional insecticides that are used in agricultural fields in the contiguous United States. So similar to what the herbicide strategy was, we focus on the taxa that's most likely to be directly impacted. So, we're working on listed terrestrial and aquatic invertebrates that may be impacted directly, or maybe those species that sort of depend on invertebrates. That could be as part of their diet or for pollination efforts. And for the insecticide strategy, which is a little bit different than the herbicide strategy, because some of these species can actually be found in agricultural fields, this strategy focused not only on exposure off field from spray drift or runoff or erosion, but we also took a look at and considered potential exposures to on field for those species that might be on field. Brian? So we thought it might be helpful, folks, here, if you're familiar with the herbicide strategy and being able to spend some time reading that through, or some of the registration decisions or actions that have sort of incorporated this strategy for the herbicides, just sort of high level, what are some of the differences between the insecticide and the herbicide strategies? So similarities, as I mentioned before, they both focus on the sensitive taxa that's most likely to be impacted. And so, that will be insects and such for the insecticide versus plants for the herbicide strategy. We both are only focusing on the contiguous species under the Fish and Wildlife Service purview. So none of those under NIMS, and not focusing on Hawaii or those territories. They both considered foliar and soil applications, both considered exposure from runoff and erosion or spray drift as sort of the main drivers of exposure. And we also modeled or considered a variety of habitats that include terrestrial, wetland, or even flowing aquatic systems. But there are some differences that are between the two. So for the insecticide strategy, depending on the exact sort of aquatic or terrestrial species or taxa we're talking about, there can be definitely a difference in the availability of toxicity data. So, for the herbicide strategy, it's pretty common through our registration process to get at least 10 species or more of plants. So we had quite the range of species to consider toxicity information from. Sometimes for either terrestrial or aquatic invertebrates, we only have one or very few species. And so you have to make some sort of considerations regarding sensitivity or surrogacy for the insecticide strategy. For the insecticide strategy, we also did include seed treatments in terms of like their potential to run off or erode into offsite areas. And as I mentioned before, because some of these species can be found on field, we did consider the impact to listed species that might be found on the field. And some of these species occupy pretty niche or pretty unique habitats, particularly things like small vernal pools. And so we wanted to make sure that we were considering those types of exposures as well. And, we did include usage data for both the herbicide and the insecticide strategy, but in terms of the impact, that can be very different for the insecticide strategy because they can be used in different areas and used at different amounts. And so it did seem to have a bigger impact, the usage information for the insecticide strategy. And what I want to just note here is like all the differences and all the things we're talking about, thank you for your comments. We got a lot of comments on these different sort of pieces or topics, and it really helped shaped the final insecticide strategy. So briefly, if you haven't seen this framework before, just kind of say it's a three-step framework where the first step is us identifying the potential for population level impacts. This is where we consider exposure, toxicity data, and other species life history data to determine the potential for impacts, and at what level. And so step two is identifying the type and level of mitigation. So this is where we determine, how much mitigation you might need for spray drift, how much you might need for reducing exposure for runoff or erosion. And then that really sort of sets up the stage in terms of how much an individual user may need to comply with when it becomes on a label. And the third step is really sort of integrating that onto the label, where those mitigations are going to apply. Is this going to apply sort of more broadly across the entire label? We know these species, many of them are just very distinctly located across the country. And so are some of these mitigations better served in geographically specific informations, under PULAs, those pesticide use limitation areas that we're trying really hard to refine. And so that's really where step 3 sort of integrates sort of the impact, the level of mitigation needed, and where it's going to apply on the label, and how folks will sort of understand where they need and what they need to do. Next slide. And so we're talking about sort of the different levels of mitigation that might be needed. And this really goes back to the potential for population level impacts. Both of these strategies, all the strategies to date, sort of bend these into a magnitude of difference. We call them the MODs. They range from anywhere from less than 1 up to greater than 100, and that really defines the potential for the impact, but also more importantly the level of mitigation needed. So, these MODs are informed by toxicity information, exposure information, and they could really be modified depending on some life history qualifiers. We call them modifiers for some species. Like if they occur in large flowing waters, how does that really compare to some of our modeling assumptions or things that we may sort of consider when we determine population level impacts? So it can be all the way from not needing any mitigation to what we categorize as needing a high level of mitigation. So the 2 main exposure routes that we really sort of focus on in the strategies is runoff and erosion and spray drift. So what we're sort of showing here is just a simple schematic of what runoff may look like from an aggregated field. It's running into one of our mitigation options that we have in our mitigation menu, the websites there on the side. We call that from our ecological mitigation support document. This one's running into a grass strip, and it just sort of shows how we hope to achieve reducing exposure through these types of mitigation measures. And this is just sort of one example of that. When we're deriving these mitigation measures, we really knew there were some drivers in terms of the potential for exposure. And one of those really are the runoff vulnerability. It's closely tied to precipitation, but other soil and site characteristics that occur across the landscape. And so we wanted to be able to sort of parse out where those potentials for vulnerability are, because we know they vary across the landscape. And so sort of taking that high or that maximum level potential for runoff and then sort of basing everything else off of that by an order of magnitude or 50%, we were able to sort of map across the country where these vulnerabilities are sort of greatest or least likely, depending on how you look at that. And this is how we sort of defined, if you occur maybe in one of these locations where the runoff isn't as high, we're giving you relief points. So if you're in an area that maybe you said per a label, you needed 6 points, but you sort of look where you're at on the map, you're like, I'm in an area that has low potential, and then that affords me, 3 relief points already towards those total 6. And so this is a really sort of effective way for folks to sort of understand their potential, but also help to sort of meet those mitigation points that they may see on a label. And again, this is sort of something similar for spray drift. What you see here is a ground application. And so depending on the use and the magnitude of difference with the population level impact, will define a spray drift buffer distance. And then that sort of sets sort of the baseline by which a spray drift buffer may be needed. But just like runoff, there are a variety of mitigation options that you can use to reduce that buffer size. You can consider things such as buildings under certain circumstances or roads, and we have those defined in our ecological mitigation support document and strategy documents of what those definitions are. That's definitely an area that we're always trying to sort of improve on, that label language. But it also sort of shows here that there are other features, both landscape features as well as application parameters features that somebody could employ to then also subtract from that necessary buffer. So for example, if you had a windbreak of a certain design or size, you could use that to reduce your buffer by, some percentage. If you had a hooded sprayer, that would allow you to reduce the buffer as well. So how do we basically take all this information, all these mitigation measures, all the complexity that may occur on a label, and how do we help users actually understand it, integrate it, and implement it? So, we are trying to develop and we are developing tools to help growers and other pesticide users. Brian's going to talk a little bit about the first one here on this slide, which is improving the map. So we sort of say that generically, but we really mean it's sort of taking the Fish and Wildlife Service species range maps, trying to really define where those species are likely to occur through a standardized process that we've developed. We've put that out there for other folks to sort of use, and we've been having good success with folks developing those refined Pula maps for us, and we are going to continue to work on those. Anne here is going to talk a little bit more about some of our outreach efforts, and that's definitely a big area as we sort of turned from developing the strategy methodology to outreach. And this all really just can't happen unless we have a successful Bulletins Live 2. So we've been working really hard behind the scenes to make that more functional, because we know as we implement and approve some of these registrations with these options and BLT, we're just going to really need that system to be working really well. And we're also trying to find just different ways, find tools for the growers or the users. We have a spray drift and a runoff calculator where we have all the options on there, and you can choose, you work through it. Do I have that? Do I not have that? And it helps you sort of, mathematically define, do I have enough points? How many points do I have in this field? What's my spray drift buffer after I implement all of these different options that I may want to use on my field? We're working on worksheets, checklists, and we're also working on a very web-friendly and eventually mobile-friendly app that sort of integrates all this information into a sort of one-stop shop kind of place. So users have that functionality and those tools sort of, at the hand and at the ready. And
Amy,
so,
can you hear
I
me?
just sort of wanted
No.
to maybe highlight a few of the changes that we did make from the draft to the final insecticide strategy. This is again really based on all the comments that we got. Thank you everybody for the comments that you had. I think in terms of some of the erosion or the runoff ones, we were able to either through additional information that you sent to us or asking us to revisit certain things, we added additional runoff measures. We added polyacrylamide as a runoff measure. We were able to give more points and make more differentiation between sandier soil types. And we were able to also sort of increase some of the mitigation options for spray drift. So we got a lot of comments on spray drift. We spent a lot of time between the draft and the final insecticide really sort of focusing in on this exposure route, probably even more so than we did for the herbicide strategy. And through these strategies, we were continuing to refine and re-examine how we define the spray drift buffer distances. So this last iteration between the draft and final insecticide, we got additional field studies, we got additional information, and sort of taking that all together on a weight of evidence, we were eventually resulted in a different spray drift buffer distances, and we reduced them, and that's really was based on a really robust, sound scientific evaluation. We also got a lot of comments and some data about adding additional spray drift mitigation options, particularly those for air blast, because there wasn't that many in the previous iterations of these strategies. And so we were able to sort of look at that information and add several more measures for those types of applications. And also another area that we really spent a lot of time sort of working through is trying to find a new and updated approach to qualify, if you will, conservation programs and for erosion and runoff. And so we've sort of set forth in those strategies, if you can, a process by which the EPA is derived some criteria. And we're going to be looking at sort of qualified, we're going to be looking at conservation programs to see if they qualify for points. Previously we were giving people 2 points if they were in a program. sort of the way that we are hoping to envision this, some programs may even qualify for up to 9 points. And so that's something that we're just really starting to take on an effort, and that'll be something that we'll continue to do as we continue to implement some of these strategies. We also, oh, that's okay, just some few minor things. We went out with the draft insecticides strategy. Oh, that's okay. Just a few things. We did get some comments and feedback about species being on agricultural fields. So we continue to work with Fish and Wildlife Service to sort of update that list. And, in terms of sort of really understanding the species list at large, we were realizing some of the species that were designated to be in wetlands were really driving some of the need for the mitigations and resulting probably in higher exposures. And so we wanted to sort of parse those out so we could sort of focus on those separately from some of the other species that might not need as much mitigation. So what are some of the next steps? So we're going to use these strategies to inform, new active ingredient registrations. And you might have already seen that because we've been putting out for public comments some proposed new AIs. And also we're going to work towards integrating that into our registration review case studies. We're going to continue to work with stakeholders on support and educational materials. Like I mentioned, we're going to continue to work on this app that integrates several of these sources of information so folks can kind of have that in one place. And, these strategies are sort of meant to always be sort of living documents, living evolution. And so we are working on certain areas. I talked about that process for qualifying programs. We are still actively working on some very specific mitigation measures, most notably some drift reducing adjuvants for insecticides. And then again, just sort of tailoring some of the language and label language that we use. And then Brian's going to talk a little bit about some of the mapping efforts here. But finally, just want to end on a note that, we always continue and welcome input from growers, pesticide users, other stakeholders on these mitigation outcomes, any label clarity, some challenges you may be facing, how feasible, how practical they are, what other new tools or what other functionalities, would really help you sort of implement this in the field and on site. So I think with that, I am going to turn it over to Brian, right?
Brian, can you hear me? Hello?
Okay.
No. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you, Jeffrey.
Okay, they just want for them to slow down if they could.
Okay, sounds good. We're waiting on Brian, I think, right?
Okay, can you guys hear me and see me?
Yes,
If
slow
so,
down,
please give me
please.
any type of sign.
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Can't hear us for some reason. It's really bizarre.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing a sign yet. Quick second.
I gave
Oh,
you
here
a
we go.
thumbs up.
All right, got some thumbs up. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you very much for having me out here today. I really always appreciate the opportunity to get a chance to talk with you guys. I also want to thank you. I like to always start with thank you. So thank you for your feedback over the years. I think it really has been meaningful, and we do consider your feedback, through the different processes that we have. Even sometimes, it may not always seem like it, but we definitely look at your input and we consider it and we incorporate it, as we can. And so I really do appreciate that, especially today we're going to talk about some improved mapping that really has been the subject of feedback from public input processes kind of over the years. So this has kind of stemmed from some of the input that we've got. So thank you for the input, and thank you specifically around your input around mapping. And so why is that important though? So the mapping is important because sometimes there's a use directions for a label that might only be relevant or important to a particular area. Maybe it's use directions that are relevant to a species, or maybe it's to a particular habitat or some other kind of geographically limited area. Right. So in those cases where a use direction might only apply to a small area where maybe a habitat or a species is located, then applying that set of use directions more broadly across the landscape may not be necessary or even appropriate, I think, in other places. Oh yeah, sure. Gotcha. Okay. So I was just given a nice reminder to slow down. So I'm gonna go slow down to make sure that the translator can keep up. So I appreciate that. Sometimes I get a little excited. So thank you. So in the cases or situations where we do have a need for a spatially explicit or spatially limited use directions, we use a system called Bulletins Live 2. And that system communicates to a pesticide user whether or not they are in an area where there are use directions that apply specifically to them, and if so, what are they? Okay. So the underlying basis for a pesticide user to determine if they are in an area where a pesticide, the use direction applies to them is based on maps, right? So we recognize the importance of those maps being as refined as they can be, meaning that they represent areas where a species is most likely to be, and to represent those areas that are important for that species, right? So we developed a process along with Fish and Wildlife Service, with USDA, with support from University of Georgia, and also a number of folks who are in this room today who helped to test that process, which I really do appreciate, which is very helpful. And the purpose of that process was to develop a systematic way to identify those areas for a species that are most relevant and where those species are likely to be. So the process basically, and it's at its core, is relatively simple. And the process is to gather information that's available for a species, right? And just find mappable information that's available that allows us to take that information that's available and put it into a mapping environment so we can map out really where those areas are. And this could be designated critical habitat, it could be a species range, it could be just habitats where a species either prefers or habitats where a species does not prefer. So either way. And it can be different for each species. So it's difficult to have a one systematic process that works, across all species. So the process is flexible enough where it allows for the different either data types, amount of data that's just the individual species characteristics, right, for each one. So we did just release a set of species maps that followed this process earlier this week. Total on our website, which is listed on this last bullet. We have about 40 or so maps on the website. We have many more that are in the process right now that are in different stages of either development and or review. So we do anticipate many more coming out in the near term. So what do the species look like? And what do the maps look like? Here's an example of the Meats milkweed. On the left is the species range. The species range, you see a kind of a big blob on the right side the east side of Kansas and western Missouri as well, to be a little more technical. That's about 10 million acres total. But so we took the species through our process where we identified types of habitats that are relevant for the species, types of habitats that are not. We looked at where the species has been known to occur, looked at this particular species has soil restrictions, elevation restrictions, and some other specificities around its habitat. So we kind of took the species through the process, ended up with a core map, which is on the right. That core map is that green area, which really kind of honed in on those key areas for that species. And that's all I have for today. So thank you very much. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Thank you, Brian.
You're gonna turn off your audio and then I'll turn mine on.
Brian, can you hear me? Nope. Okay. Hello? Okay. We can move on to Anne's presentation. We'll do a discussion period at the end. Anne, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes. Thank you. Do you want me to share slides or are you good?
I can share slides, I believe. Just all right. Can you all see that?
Yes, yep, perfect. If you can remember to speak slowly, that'd be great.
Sure. So good afternoon. I'm Ann Overstreet, Director of the Pesticide Reevaluation Division. I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about the ESA Outreach Work Group. It's sort of a culmination of what you were hearing from Amy and Brian and the outreach that we're working towards, some of the successes we've had to date and some of the focus for the future. So our internal outreach group meets once or twice a month, and we've been coordinating with SLAs, PSAPs, industry, ag retailers, crop consultants, and other federal agencies. And our goal is to reach those that are in communication with the applicators, such as extension, ag retailers, and crop consultants.
Wait, Anne, sorry. There's a little bit of interference, like it's a little buzzy on your end. Could you maybe put the mic closer or something?
Is that better?
Yes, I
Okay.
think so.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure. So our goal is to provide consistent messaging and coordinate efforts to discuss any changes in priorities with our work group. So while we're working to provide materials, folks are developing their own materials and we're providing review of those as well. So EPA regions early on engaged with the SLAs and PSAPs, as I've mentioned, and tribes within their regions to get feedback on the education and outreach needs specific to the efforts that Amy and Brian just discussed. So some of those outcomes from that collaboration, quite honestly, as I mentioned, we had provided overview of and review of stakeholder materials. We've worked collaboratively with, for example, the Weed Science Society of America and Crop Life America on their process flow charts. Others, we've partnered with USDA and had our stakeholders engaged in many of those materials to both identify what types of outreach would be best suited to reach the grower community, as well as who to engage in producing those materials. So part of the considerations are to balance our resources and to identify those priority items. Obviously, the folks on the work group internal to EPA have other priorities and are managing quite the caseload across the registration review spectrum. So we have folks working part-time on this, obviously, so we do try to identify those priorities. So part of the outreach that we did was to establish several available resources. We're going to look at those in a little more detail here shortly. But to adjust the priorities based on needs, I think is one of the key items I want to stress, that once we know which items are being released, which new active ingredients, for example, what labels are being stamped, we want to focus specifically towards that material and make sure that growers have that information. So some of those successes we've developed, I know that Amy touched on and Brian touched on a few of these, including the resources toolbox, the Bulletins Live flyer, which is a summary, the mitigation menu website and web page, which will eventually also morph into our calculators and our web and app mobile-friendly web page, our runoff and erosion spray drift calculators and worksheets, and the webinars. And we'll announce, I'll share a webinar that's upcoming here shortly as well. So I think one of the things to highlight as well before I move off this slide is that USDA hosted some of these webinars, and we've had a great collaborative effort across our stakeholders in having speakers as well as folks hosting these webinars. Taking a little deeper dive into the toolbox specifically, this is obviously, hopefully folks here on PPDC and others have been able to take a look at this more carefully. It is a searchable web content that we are able to update on a regular basis. And there's a tremendous amount of information in there, including where we house our webinars, our one-pagers, our guidance documents, and presentations that are helpful. So Bulletins Live 2, the flyer, this is a one-pager actually. There's a snapshot of it there. A little tough to read on the slide, but you can see there, it's what are bulletins? What do you need to know? How do you search? What do you do with them, and how do you learn more? Then actually, where do you find that on the labels? So as these become more integrated and available on labels, we want to make sure that users are finding this more routinely and consistently, and hopefully on labels that are consistently stamped so that we have the structured labeling approach. Mitigation menu is definitely, as I mentioned, contains the spray drift and runoff calculators. They are downloadable, so it's very helpful. So they can be saved and utilized when folks are off the website, which is very helpful. And then the links to the crosswalks between our mitigation, EPA's ecological mitigation measures with the USDA and RCS conservation practices, also very helpful. So all of that is linked currently and was last updated a couple of months ago. It's the nice part about this mitigation menu that we can update that rather frequently. And at the bottom of the website, folks will know when the last update of that web content was so that they can compare it to previous versions they might have utilized. So the mobile app, and Amy mentioned this briefly as well, this is currently in development, and we will first create the web content and then a user-friendly mobile app that will consolidate both the runoff and erosion points calculator and the spray drift calculator. We're looking at July for the web-friendly portion of that, and then in the fall for the mobile app release. Eventually tying this into the Bulletins Live 2 system and continuing to update the materials as needed as we begin the implementation more frequently. So that's the end of my presentation. Jeffrey, happy to take any questions at this point.
Thank you, Anne. I think we'll leave it to the end, if that works for you.
Absolutely.
Kim, are you with us?
I am. Let me
Thank
get
you.
my screen shared. All right. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. So I'm just gonna talk about some of the stuff that we've been doing here in Tennessee. So I'm an extension specialist and have spent I'm not a PSEP coordinator currently, pesticide safety education program. I am just an extension specialist with the University of Tennessee. But I've got a long-standing history doing pesticide safety education. So let me make sure. So I'm currently with University of Tennessee, and I just want to talk about some of the stuff we've been doing moving forward with ESA here in Tennessee. And so I've spent a good bit of time over the past couple years now that ESA has been unrolling, just giving presentations to different groups, in particular across the Southeast, because that's where I'm located. So I've spent the first introduction on ESA was at our Mile and No Till, where we had about 1,000 folks come through that field day and just introduce the approach and what's going on and some of the changes. With ESA, spoke at Tennessee Vegetation Management, also spoke to Clemson's Cooperative Extension, EPA Region 6 inspectors, and as well as Louisiana Vegetation Management and Louisiana Ag Aviation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about specifically some of the stuff we've done, but some of the challenges that we find in doing outreach on this at the ground level is just making sure we reach our target audience and getting that target audience to understand the immediate importance of some of these regulatory changes. And then also just limited examples. There's so many unknowns. This is a slower implementation. And so it's hard to do some of this immediate outreach because it's not directly impacting my growers currently in Tennessee. And then just making sure that we have solid records and just re-educating and continuing education on the importance of record keeping. One of the big things that I spend a lot of time talking about is how successful our producers are, but we don't always do a great job at recording some of our successes. So originally what we did is back in the summer of 2024, so we hosted Sapphireg and some of the EPA personnel here in Jackson, Tennessee. And after that original, I guess, whenever we were talking about the herbicide strategy and everything coming out and some of these changes, one of the big things we discussed here in Tennessee is we didn't know who in the state were going to be directly impacted. We didn't know the particular folks. My husband and I are new to Tennessee. We moved here from Louisiana. So we just didn't have the relationships with folks like NRCS and just a lot of the folks throughout the state. So what we did in conjunction with Farm Bureau is we set up a meeting just so that we started to get to know folks. And that really is the important thing. You know, the value of this meeting, PBDC, is creating those relationships and having different perspectives. And so we just kind of pared that down, in a state level. And we had our first meeting summer of 2024, and we just kind of set up group goals and different aspects of that. And so this is what our Tennessee ESA working group consists of. We have the University of Tennessee. We have a lot of our pest management extension specialists and researchers such as Dr. Larry Steckel, Dr. Steve Brown are all part of this group. And it's co-chaired with myself and Tennessee Farm Bureau. We also have our Department of Ag as part of it. But we have our USDA, NRCS folks, as well as U.S. Fish and Wildlife here in the state. Tennessee Wildlife, as well as our National Cotton Council, a lot of our grower groups, our industry folks and ag retailers. And we also have some producers and some of our other universities are a part of this group as well. And I guess the big thing that I want to note is the goal of this group is not to meet to death. We all have so many meetings, and what we really wanted to do because of this, I don't want to say a slower implementation, but it's as more products come up, it's not an immediate thing that's on the forefront of our growers, especially with the current climate of agriculture. I mean, it's rained every day. And it's really hard for a lot of our growers currently in this market and everything else. So we don't want to meet to death, but we want to make sure that everybody has those relationships so that they understand the importance and the value of making sure that we document and continue to protect endangered species. And so I just wanted to show this example of a record keeping manual that we have created here in Tennessee. What we're going to do, me and our Tennessee Department of Agriculture, myself and them, are working to update this to also include the importance of ESA. We have had a lot of traction with a lot of our growers and our county agents utilizing this record keeping manual. And so we want to kind of bring more attention to ESA through this. And so we're going to be modifying that this summer. And this is just an example of one of our record keeping sheets. So just like Ann and Amy and Brian all talked about, is just all these groups working on ESA. I've had the great opportunity to sit on a lot of these committees. The ESA collaboration group, which is with Wayne Bueller out of North Carolina, and Dr. Bill Chisholm, who spoke earlier today, along with EPA and a great group of folks that are working as a part of that group. APCO's ESA work group, the ESA regional effort discussion, which is another group that's getting in. And what that group's doing is working to create training materials that are more for a regional level, because each region of the country are a little bit different needs. And so it's really great to have that communication. APSI and EPA, are the American Association of Pesticide Safety Educators, and EPA are meeting as well. Crop Life America, which y'all heard that. And there's a lot of other groups that are doing a lot of the similar stuff. What's great about all of this is I just want to say how thankful I am from someone out in the field having that relationship with EPA, to be able to make sure that we're communicating effectively, and there's continuity across the country from a lot of the outreach that's going on. With that, we also, working with Dr. Bill Chisholm and others, we created, after the herbicide strategy came out, we did a presentation that we utilized here in Tennessee for our private applicator recertification training points. And with this training, it just was a generic overview, an introduction to ESA, just to kind of start getting applicators aware of it again. I don't want to say that this is new, because ESA has been being talked about for a long time, but it is something that we need to bring to the forefront of our applicators' minds with some of these changes. With this original presentation that we did, there was a fact sheet that went with it to help answer questions. So, what's hard as an educator, sometimes you get a presentation and you really don't know exactly what all you're supposed to say. So this document was created to go and help facilitate those educators. Alyssa Arnold, myself, Bill Chisholm, Cameron Douglas, and Naranja out of Maryland all worked on this together originally. Now, with support of EPA, and we're very thankful for that. We are working this summer to update it to include some of the changes with the insecticide strategy. But it just goes through a lot of the ESA resources and brings forward a lot of the stuff that's already been discussed. But I do find that it's important to reiterate that. And so this is a slide that goes to the end of that presentation. But I think that a lot of what we're talking about, especially at the ground level, you've got to build that trust with your growers and your folks. And so we've all got to work collaboratively. And it's new and evolving, and there's a lot of changes that are going to happen over several years. And so it's something that we're going to have to continue to present on and talk about. So one of the things that I wanted to conclude with is, if you wanted to replicate something like this, again, I think it's really important to keep in mind that we don't want to overmeet, and we don't want to, just continue I want action items whenever we do have these meetings. And so it's really important to identify parties within your area that have a stake in ESA. And we want to keep people engaged. And actually, what was really interesting, so I submitted these slide set, but yesterday I got an email from our Tennessee NRCS and USDA folks asking to speak later this summer to our U.S. Fish and Wildlife folks and TWRA and Quail Forever here in Tennessee on ESA. So just having those relationships and having realistic expectations is really important. You know, we don't talk a whole lot, but I do try to keep them updated throughout the year as changes happen. When the insecticide strategy came out, I just try to make sure that there is some uh, communication, and as people leave positions, trying to update that and just foster and facilitate um, those relationships so that you can pick up the phone and call somebody as things change. So we're still going to do a lot more. It's recertification season for us moving into next year. So we'll have a big push. So our hope is to do a lot more outreach on ESA. We do have some PULAs in Middle Tennessee, not as many out here in West Tennessee, where the majority of our ag is. But I do have a PULA right across the highway from my house for World Sunflower. So it is something that we do pay attention to. And so this is something we're going to continue to move forward with and work with our constituents to get as much outreach out there so that they can be in compliant and we do protect endangered species. So with that, let me quit sharing.
Thank you, Kim. We can open it up for discussion with the members. I know John Wise had a comment. So John, if you're here.
Yes, I'm here. And I've actually been here since 11:30 this morning, but I failed to have Jeffrey admit me into the panelist till here recent. So thank you for that, Jeffrey. I've got just a couple of short comments and or questions that I would like Amy, Brian, or anybody to confirm whether I'm understanding ESA correctly. I'm giving guidance to quite a few specialty crop growers in Michigan and trying to help them be compliant. And there are a few nuances that I'm hearing from others that I may not have this correct. So the first thing is that the guidance I'm giving to specialty crop growers here in Michigan is that if they are intending to apply a pesticide that has an endangered species statement on the label, they must go to Bulletin's Live 2. They must enter their address. They must enter the month of application, EPA registration number, and immediately they're going to see whether or not they're in a PULA or not. And what I'm telling them is that regardless whether you're in the PULA or not, you should print that bulletin and keep it in your record so that that you have evidence that you have taken these steps. So I would like confirmation whether that's correct or not. Number two, if they're in a PULA and there are mitigation measures that they can see through your materials that you offer, how do they need to document those mitigation steps? So in the case that they are challenged, maybe there's a visit from a Department of Agriculture person. The growers that I'm working with, they don't want to be caught off guard and not have the correct documentation that they are taking the steps to be compliant. Those are the main things that I'm looking for confirmation from Amy or Brian or anybody else. And maybe the last question I have is there a master list of all the active ingredients or trade products that have endangered species statements to refer to, or do we simply have to look label by label by label by label? That's it. Thank you.
Amy or Brian, are you still there?
Give me a second.
Well, while we're waiting for Amy and Brian, John, I think generally that is correct what you've articulated. I think. Are you there?
Yes, I apologize. We had a little logistical issue over here with the number of computers versus number of speakers was giving us a little bit of a hard time. But I think hopefully you can hear us now. And I was going to say, I think the same thing you are. I think for the first question, I'll start there. Is that generally, yes, that's the process. I would just add, follow the label. If the label directs somebody to go to BLT, then they need to go to BLT and see if they're in a PULA and if there's any use directions that are specific for their area. There is a little bit of a nuance on being able to require that person to print out the bulletin, but we recommend that somebody who does go to BLT and if they're in a PULA and they have those use directions, they do print out it out. That can be as a PDF or that can be as a paper copy, either one. I think we just help them just to show that show what those label requirements were and that they follow them, but it's not a requirement under FIFRA because there are some limitations to what we can require. I'll go to your third question because I forgot the second one, so I'm going to have to ask you to repeat the second question. You were asking about the master list. There is a relatively newer feature on Bulletins Live 2. It's an advanced resources. I can send me an email or I'm happy to have a call later and I can kind of show you where that is. But it does allow you to download some information from the BLT system, which it does include which active ingredients, and you can download the spatial data. You can kind of basically download anything that's in the BLT system. You can download it onto your computer. So that is downloadable.
Perfect. Thank you. I think that second question was just related to if mitigation options are selected by a farmer, how do they document that in a way that would be defendable?
Sure. I'll start just from some of the materials that we're developing right now. So we're developing a couple of different tools. One is it's basically a PDF that somebody can kind of fill out that has like the different mitigation options in the mitigation menu that somebody can say, okay, these are the options for me. This is what I chose, and these are the number of points it's worth, and you can document the number of points that were on the label. So that I think is a good option. There's the electronic tools. There's an Excel calculator that's available on our website as well. So if somebody chooses to use the Excel calculator, that can also serve as their inputs and how they filled it out. That can serve as their documentation. Ann and Amy both touched on an application that we're developing as well that's supposed to be kind of a simplified version of that, at least to start with, and that can also serve as either electronic or printed copy as well. So there's some different kind of options right now. But at the same time, I think if people are running into problems with respect to any of those options or other ones, please let us know, because we want to make sure that we have enough tools that are available to allow people to do whatever they need, include document kind of their choices and their label compliance and that type of thing. So just let us know and we'll continue to try to do everything we can to make sure that we have at least tools that are available to people to allow them to document.
Okay. Thank you, all of you, for all you've done to make this amenable. It's not easy. Farming is a busy lifestyle, but I appreciate all you've done, and thank you for your answers to my questions.
Thank you. I appreciate the questions.
Hardy Kern.
Yeah, thank you. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to stay off camera because the Wi-Fi got taken out by a tree or something in the area, and cell service isn't great. I first want to say thank you so much, Amy and Brian and Ann, and everyone for the presentation. And also we want to greatly thank you for all the work that went into this. We know how hard everyone's worked. I really also want to appreciate the different sessions that were undertaken while the insecticide and herbicide strategies and vulnerable species plans were being developed to bring industry and agencies and environmental NGOs and a whole bunch of other groups all to the table. I think that was key in keeping up conversations, forming new ways of looking at things, new types of partnerships. And even though we're moving into the implementation phase, I hope that something like that continues to happen. My main question is, a lot of the ways that the strategies have been finalized, and we appreciate a lot of what's in there, give credit to practices that may already be in use by a lot of growers. I'm not necessarily talking about enrollment in a state level program, more so practices that may already be in place or different exemptions for runoff and drift, depending on county level precipitation or other seasonal factors, things like that. If we are finding that there are still impacts on species despite these mitigations being taken, is there flexibility enough built in where, I don't know, additional mitigations could be required, or, you know, there's a way to kind of update things as we're moving through implementation of these strategies? So it's a long way of saying, if we're finding that the mitigations that have been suggested are not doing enough to conserve the species that they're meant to conserve, is there a good mechanism for updating those so that the right outcomes are achieved? And I want to again say thank you so much to everyone for all the work that went into these.
Yeah, so I appreciate your comment. And so I think any of us at the table could answer that, so we can pass this off if we need to. I can pass it over to Brian, but definitely, you know, based on the point system and how we are specifically mitigating for species in different ranges, and very specifically to the active ingredient, to the toxicity, and then coupling that with the exposure. I'll let Brian talk a little bit more about how we're protective of that.
Yeah, I think just to answer your question directly, I think there is flexibility to have the mitigations or the credit for those mitigations change as data becomes available, right? So there might be, and that could take the form of a couple different forms. That could look like maybe there's new mitigations that we didn't consider or include in the mitigation strategy, that because we didn't have enough data, so maybe data becomes available, and so we can maybe have enough to include that in the strategy, or there may be some new studies that come available that show either some of the mitigations are more or less efficacious than we had, you know, the current data that we were evaluating at the time kind of demonstrated. So if that happens, or if there's a different type of data that becomes available, and it could certainly become qualitative data like the kind of you're talking about, I think there is room to adapt as data becomes available to show. But we definitely have an interest in making sure that our process is both flexible and effective. So, and Amy, I think one of the.
Oh, that's good. I was just gonna say, just to kind of get at a little bit more of it as well, is that, you know, we developed these strategies, we did work with Fish and Wildlife Service too, and, you know, hoping that these measures do meet the mark to avoid jeopardy and adverse modification. But again, this is where, you know, they still have an active voice in sort of this process where we, you know, we're going through consultation or things. And so as their species experts continue to update their statuses and things of that nature, I expect we'll sort of learn sort of, you know, where we're at with the mark with regards to sort of the ultimate goal, which is reducing those impacts and preserving those species, right? So I just want to say I still see the fish as being a major part of sort of this implementation and ongoing kind of like iterative process.
That's great. Thank you so much. And yeah, I don't mean to doubt the process at all, just that, you know, modeling only goes so far, but that all sounds great. And I really appreciate all the work here. Thanks, y'all.
Nathan?
Great. Well, thanks for this presentation. Amy, Brian, Ann, and Kim, did I give everyone? There's a lot of people there, but you know, your teams continue to do a good job in forming and carrying out this novel process that we're all going through in real time. And with regards to Kim's presentation, I'm glad to see states are staying involved on this issue, because states are absolutely key to making sure this plan is successful and helping helping make compliance easier and more intuitive. So I want to thank those in state level positions like Kim, who are doing what they can to make sure that pesticide users can successfully comply with this framework. And on the federal end of things, I think EPA has continued to make good progress in this area, despite the administration change. And I want to recognize that, and we appreciate that. And we'll continue to work with the agency and other stakeholders in developing core maps, which we've invested a considerable amount of time and resources working on, because it's important. And it's been an educational process for us, as I'm sure it has been for others involved. So I'll just say that we appreciate the agency's leadership in this area, and we hope we can continue on a path that achieves the ESA's conservation goals. And to that end, I do, there's always a but I do want to reiterate what I said before in this forum many times, is that all of this must comply with the ESA. It's the Endangered Species Act that sets the requirements, not the strategies. So if you start weakening the strategies, like what we saw again with the final insecticide strategy, that doesn't let you off the hook for still doing what you need to do to avoid jeopardy and minimize take. So you can weaken the strategies into oblivion all you want, but it's not going to change what you ultimately have to do, which is make sure these poisons aren't harming the most vulnerable creatures on the planet. That's what this is all about. So assuming we're all in alignment with the administration's stated goal of creating efficiencies in government, maintaining the strongest possible strategies is the most efficient thing this office can possibly do right now, because it gets rid of so much headache and work on the back end that will either come voluntarily or through a court order. And destabilizing the strategies destabilizes regulatory certainty, and I hope that's something that everyone understands. But to the extent we can stop chipping away at the protectiveness of the strategies and the pilot, which I gotta say it gets tiring to say the least. But to the extent we can do that, I will say just keep up the good work, and please keep it strong. That's all.
Thanks, Jay.
Mark Lane.
Yes, I want to echo, the congratulations that Nathan put out there. The more I hear about these strategies, the more impressed I am. Some good management. So where I'm at on this, and where I was most of my career, was trying to diffuse best management practices with regard to reducing the risks of pesticides. That happened to be, and the innovation happened to be, integrated pest management. You guys have some different innovations, and I think they're great. Mitigations is almost the same stuff, So I would encourage you to get maybe more process oriented with regard to diffusion, and using the diffusion innovation process to not only more effectively uh, get the adoption of these strategies, but probably increase the rate. That's what we found when we started using more diffusion innovation process. So that's my encouragement there. Let me know. I'm an old retired guy. I'm not out consulting anymore, but I'm always happy to tell you what I know. So The other thing is I was particularly impressed with Kim and her work in extension. That's where I originally learned how to do the stuff that I did, and the importance of change agents. And she seems to be really good at developing what I call a change agent core, and that's going to be really helpful. The thing I would finish with is I'm sure that she has amongst her change agents, as of you guys, the other groups, the Sierra Club, the Audubon Society, et cetera, because you need to have them, folks like Nathan's group, uh, you need to have them available because of the last thing that Nathan said is that the ESA is driving this, and there are folks out there that not only would like to weaken the strategies, they want to weaken the law, just like NEPA. And those groups are going to be dependent on you guys to know when those challenges are occurring, so they can gird their loins, as it were. And so, if you're going to be partners, you got to be partners, and so you got to. It's that transparency that Ruckelshaus talked about. So that's uh, just a challenge from an old entomologist. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. I did want to say that we do have the Audubon Society as part of it here in Tennessee. I just didn't have them on the slide, but we do try to have as many resources, but as many stakeholders as so that they can have their opinions known and represented, because it is important.
Anyone else? Great. Well, it's 4:30 and our next session's at 4:40. So, Ed, do you think we should take a break for 10 minutes and reconvene?
Sounds good.
Thank you. Great. It is 4:40. Can we get a raise of hands, please? Thank you. So we are nearing the end of the PPDC's agenda. Ed Messina, the director of the Office of Pesticides Programs, will do some summary and synthesization for us as we look towards the next 6 months of OPP activities and how the work of the PPDC discussed today will impact those. So I'll be taking notes, trying my
Thanks,
best to
Jeffrey.
take notes.
Yeah, well, generally we reserve this time for any of the PPDC members to raise issues that haven't been raised in any of the formal settings, to table set for adding topics for the next PPDC that folks would like to see addressed. I think today's meeting, was very successful. I think it continues with the passionate and informative discussions that we had today. I want to thank all the speakers we had, the label reform group that put forward their plan and then resolved, and then we formed another work group in that setting, the farm worker update, where we provided charge questions for that group, the cross-sector priorities group, where we also provided charge questions, and then also the recent Endangered Species Act workshop, where I think hopefully folks saw that in the midst of changing priorities, OPP remains resilient in adhering to our mission of protecting human health and the environment. And we're continuing with many of the strategies around ESA and continuing to work on our endocrine disruptor screening program work and all the registration review work that's important. And I think the other thing to note is just the collaboration and coordination that needs to occur amongst multiple stakeholders here that represent different interests, and we're really trying to hit the mark in making sure that the labels that we put out there are implemented in a way that are safe to use for humans and the environment. So with that, I will open it up to anyone to raise their hand and raise topics for the next session. What did or did you not like about today's session? How can we make it better? And I think we're all in the midst of a process improvement for the PPDC, because we did normally what takes 2 days to do, we did it in 1 day. So congratulations on our I would say self-imposed process improvement lean event here and getting done in a day. With that, I'll stay quiet for a little bit and be comfortable in the silence that could ensue. Thanks, Mark.
Well, I got to laugh a little bit, Ed. You were pretty good until the end, where you said process improvement of going down from 2 days to 1 day, where it used to be 2.5 days, where we'd meet face to face and really work on relationships and do a lot of real human communication. We're down to 1 day, and I agree that we were able to have a nice product, but I do not agree that it's better or that it's an improvement. So I will leave it at that. But thank you for your service.
Thanks, Mark. I was probably being a little intentional in my provocativeness there. But are there topics that you think that we didn't get to cover that you would have liked to see, that we should have taken the 2 or 3 days that we normally take? And I agree with the in-person. We're striving to do that, and we were able to do one very recently. I agree with you on the need to do these in person. We're trying to see if we can do that for the November meeting. So thanks for raising that. And maybe Jeffrey, if you want to make a note, on the whiteboard for desire, and if there's others who feel the same, feel free to chime in, try to do, an in-person meeting.
Yeah, I'm realistic about what's probably going to happen, but I just had to put that in there. Ed, when you say, well, is there anything, I would say that while the administrator wants us to stick to statutory stuff, it's not going to get implemented unless we look at some of the more non-regulatory partnership and outreach. And I know there is some outreach going on, but I could not disagree more with the idea that integrated pest management has diffused in the communities that use pesticides. And but I think we'll just have to get back to that another time. So again, thanks, and thanks for your service.
Thank you, Mark. Bob? Bob, I'm calling on you. Your hand's up. Bob, man.
How's that, Ed?
Yep, we can hear you now. Yes.
This is wonderful. I want to echo. First of all, thank you to everybody that put so much effort into today's program. It was a wonderful show. I want to echo Mark's comment about doing this meeting in person and the importance of doing it in person, especially given some of the tall mountains we have to climb in the future. My comment is that, the agency does this for reasons, you have your own reasons for wanting to do these in person, but if there is anything that we can do to, change, change this to a in-person meeting, reach out and ask. We're happy to think outside the box and try to make things happen. I just don't want to seem as though we're not willing to help.
Thanks, Bob. Others? Jill?
First of all, I'd like to echo what's already been said and say thank you to everybody for a very good set of presentations and great discussion today. My time zone's 2 hours earlier, so I'm not quite sure what time it is. But one thing that I would ask is for the next meeting is there were several work groups that just recently sunsetted, and reports accepted or by the PPDC to provide to EPA. And I would like to see an update on where EPA is at with regard to following up on the work group recommendations that have happened recently. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Jill. And we have done that in the past, where we've talked about how the agency's been implementing prior recommendations, and I think we'll definitely put that on for November. David?
So I'm going to go back to I had a comment, but I had to formulate my thoughts here about the BLT, about the PULAs and BLT2. When I was at that workshop, what some of the farmers that were at the workshop had pointed out that there were mapping issues that where ESA were indicated, it wasn't that way in reality. There was no water in those sloughs; they were dry and ditched. And so the question of the mapping accuracy came up. And I know that at Fish and Wildlife, that the locations for endangered species a lot of times is restricted. You're not going to give the exact location. And so I see that as a potential problem. If you're a farmer and you're asked to, implement protections, mitigate, and the actual location of those species is not given, that creates, some uncertainty for the farmer. Am I really protecting it, or is there some huge buffer? So I see that as an issue. I just wanted to bring that up. Also, for I think of a presentation I saw where they talked about if let's say a car hit you know, went off the road into an orchard and damaged a tree, it wasn't just necessarily replacing the tree, it was the fruit that was lost, it was the time it would take the tree to get to reproduce the same amount of fruit. So there was I'm tying this back to the mitigation issue. So if someone's required to mitigate, let's say they can't treat a row of fruit in their orchard, I'm wondering if there's any incentives that can be implemented, not by this group, by someone else that would basically incentivize that person. Hey, you're going to have to do these things for ESA, but in the meantime, we're going to incentivize this and make sure that good habitat is put in for the endangered species they're trying to protect. You know, so it's just not a take. You know what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
you raised two great topics, and so I think you know, the information that we provided on the pesticide use limitation areas and the refinement that's happening is important to make sure we have good and accurate maps, so we're protecting species where they actually are, and not creating I would say burdens where they're not needed on growers. So I support, you know, that work there, and you heard it from some of the NGOs that are also supporting that work. Um, at the end of the day, we do need to make sure those species are protected. The other thing you raise in your second question for me brings up sort of offsets, right? So um, if if the societal choice is to tell the grower, you know, you can't treat that last row, um, we probably want to try to avoid that. Um, if that absolutely can't be avoided, and you're in a position where you're actually having a take, which happens in other parts of ESA, right? You need to build a bridge, you need to build a highway, you know, dam construction happens. Um, there are provisions in the statute for having offsets where you're creating habitat for endangered species. We haven't organizationally um, been able to solve for that issue yet. It raises a lot of how would we track it, you know, third party issues. But there have been conversations with industry and NGOs around how we would incentivize additional habitat and how we would give credit for those offsets. I think that's a future discussion, but I think it's raised in your question, and I think it's a good one, David. I don't know if you have a reaction to my my thoughts back to you on that. All right, that's thumbs up, I think. Thanks, David. Terry?
Oh, hi, Ed. Just want to double confirm that in November, we will have another update on ESA. I thought the work and the presentations were just terrific. And with the grower community and the industry gearing up for spring 2026, any materials that would be ready by November would be ideal. So I didn't know if it'd be a process if there's 20 or 30 minutes, if they could actually walk through that slide deck, kind of train the trainer, so that industry would be in a position to take advantage of these wonderful tools and help get them out to all the national distributors, down to the retailers, so that it could be teed up for all of the training meetings that take place in January and February.
Thanks, Terry. So Jeffrey is making a note that for the next PPDC, there's an interest in having additional ESA information. And then Terry, I would also say, keep an eye out for a future Office of Pesticide Programs update or OPP update, where we're going to announce, as Ann mentioned, the mitigations webinars. So new webinars that'll talk about what do mitigations look like. There'll be some videos. And so that'll also, as the other ones, will be recorded and be able to use for later viewing as well. And there will probably be on the website the slides that are used for that. So it's sort of a train the trainer, and the extension services can kind of amplify our message and not have to create new slides for kind of what the strategy says and how to implement things. So thanks for that great comment.
That'd be terrific. Thanks.
other comments? Claudia?
Yes, I have this is not my topic, so I'm not aware probably in a lot of this information, but just I'm asking this question because I am interested on it. So what is the outcomes, how you want to be measuring outcomes in all this mitigation process? And if there is a timeline that you guys will provide information, especially for the farmer who are being putting in place all this mitigation practice. So that is very general question, but for my knowledge, I mean, I just want to know, well, how will we this happening and how this will be developing?
Yes. So I think, and I'm a big fan of measures, as folks know. Obviously, you saw some of the charts and graphs we're using with an OPP, your lead measures, lag measures, your output measures, and your outcome measures. Sorry for being quick for the translators. So it's lead measures, lag measures, output measures, and outcome measures, and the differences there. I think success in the ESA space on the output measure, for me, equates to having more and more labels be ESA compliant, the coordination and the consultations with the services and the timeliness of those reviews. Those are definitely some of the output measures that are come to mind pretty readily on the ESA side. There are others on the human health side we could track as well. I think Hardy's comment about how do we know these are working in practice, to me, gets to sort of the outcome measures. And I think, that is a larger problem to tackle, which involves ensuring that species are on the recovery. And I think the vulnerable species pilot, which was designed to examine which species were in fact being impacted by pesticides, and the recovery of those species, is probably, if I were going to develop on the fly, an outcome measure, that's probably where I would look to first. I would say maybe this is a topic for the cross-cutting sub-work group. What are some good outcome measures to determine, and I'm just, parroting some of the comments back from today and this morning, not only sort of on the label improvement side, or the metrics for registrations, but really on the other policy questions that this group is making sure that we should focus on. What are some of those outcome measures that they're, and having developed some in the past, it's not as easy of a task as it may seem, because once you start measuring that, their question is, how are you reporting on that? Who's reporting? We have information collection request responsibilities if we're asking for the data. So it's a bit of a lift, but it's probably something that's worth spending some time on, to ensure that the outputs that we're doing here are actually bending the needle on a pretty important topic, which is protection of endangered species. Was that aligned with your question, Claudia? Is that sort of where you're coming from, or did I misinterpret your question?
No, that was right. Thank you.
Thanks, Claudia. Nathan.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, I want, the PBDC is, we talk a lot about that work happening in the work groups, but there's not a whole lot else that's talked about. And, I know this might sound a little funny coming from someone who works at primarily an endangered species advocacy group, but there's not near enough talk about human health consequences of the use of pesticides. Really, other than the farm worker working group, was not really discussed at all. There's a lot of really nasty things going through registration review right now. And as I mentioned, really nasty things being approved as new active ingredients. And there's more and more research about how combinational stressors like heat and pesticides together, can synergize and harm people, much more highly than the agency assumes. And so, as we're in this age of global climate change, despite some people's best effort to put their head in the sand, temperatures getting warmer. Farm workers are out there in 100-degree heat, not uncommonly. And so, I just obviously nothing I say is going to change the priorities of the current administration. So I don't expect this to be a priority necessarily at OPP, but it's an important topic of discussion, and it's one that's worthy of its own discussion, not in the context of a work group, but just in general OPP, activities that are carried out. So I think it's really important to discuss these issues, even if it's not prioritized within OPP. Having that information is really important for your statutory obligations, because as more research comes out on like combinational stressors, for instance, or the harm of organophosphates, your statutory obligations change because you have to account for that science. And it's important EPA is made aware of that. And you get the expertise of this group, which has a lot of really great human health, toxicologists and public health advocates here. So I would say, it would be nice to see more of that discussed at PPDC.
Yep, certainly. So Jeffrey has added human health consequences. And again, don't want to leave you with the impression that that is not a priority for OPP. It remains a priority. In fact, I mentioned it a couple of times, the endocrine work that's continuing, the review of the organophosphates and continuing the registration review work. I think the other thing I will add is, we are digesting the recent MAHA report and how that we will reflect on the recommendations made in that report. And I think maybe by November, there'll probably be some responses that we can talk about at the next PPDC in November for, how we are being responsive to that report as well. So human health protection remains in a very important priority within OPP, and we'll continue to do that work and adapt as new information is provided. Thanks, Nathan. Anybody else? Him.
Yeah. Hey, Ed, I just, a lot of conversation is going on, and then also my presentation. And we just got done having the Southern Region American Association of Pesticide Safety Educators. And our group is charged with disseminating a lot of information from a national level, and helping with ESA, worker protection, certification, and training. And one of the key things that continues to come up is, and I know, understand the lack of funding and all that kind of stuff, but as things continue to move forward and administration changes and all that kind of stuff, I think it's important to remember those of us that are at the local level doing a lot of that outreach and the value that educators have, extension, especially, different parts of the country. Have different levels of support for extension, and I don't know, as conversations happen, I just think that it's important to just advocate for pesticide safety educators, because we try to work with y'all, and we do very much appreciate the agency's uh, communication and cooperation with us. I saw on one of the attendees is Carolyn Schroeder's on here as well listening. I'm very appreciative of all the relationships that between certification and training, ESA, that we do have. But it's a struggle in the field to be able to do the outreach that needs to be done. So as we do the cross sector priorities work group, that's one of the conversations that I bring up there too. But I just felt like I needed to, because I didn't want you to sit in silence too long, Ed. So
Okay. Is there a topic or around this that for the next meeting that you'd like to be added, or information from the agency we could provide?
I think that's beating the dead horse with funding. I don't know if I have a topic per se. I just think it's important because, it's kind of like Mark also was bringing up IPM. IPM we've talked about for a long time. There used to be more funding for IPM and pesticide safety education, which kind of dovetails. Um, I don't know about a topic, but I felt like I really needed to say that we needed to remember educators in general. So I don't know the answer to that question, but I just thought I needed to
Yeah.
say something.
Thanks, Kim.
Mhm.
Maybe too at the next November session we can provide. We didn't at this time. We haven't done at prior sessions. Kind of the grants that we're providing and kind of the status of that. Maybe that's a takeaway from your comment. It's adjacent to your comment at least.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Ed.
Thanks, Kim. Mark?
Yeah, this is not a, I'm not looking for a new topic, or at least I don't know if this should be one anyways, but I have some concern asking you as an attorney has there been any involvement of or any implication that the Impoundment Control Act has could be triggered by some of the rescission of funding that has been going on? I asked that in particular to the non-regulatory and to the, certainly to the grants is what that law is about. But I read it about it in other agencies, and I'm pretty sure it's going to hit EPA, and I'm just wondering, or if that's something we just probably shouldn't talk about right now.
Well, I wouldn't opine on that in my current role. I wouldn't want to give legal advice about the impoundment clause. That's beyond my training, even as an attorney. I will say for OPP for 2025, all of our grants have been funded. There was a question, that came out. Some of the funds were being held back, but so for OPP, I don't think we have that issue. There were some grants that were canceled and then reinstated pretty quickly, and we've sort of worked through that. What happens in 2026 will be determined by the president's budget, by Congress, both through the House and Senate, and then reconciliation, and then what gets sent back to the president to sign. So we're sort of as an organization just waiting to see what all of those funding levels look like, including the grants that we administer, and we'll adapt based on those budgets as they come back to us for 26.
Well, I thought it'd be fun for an entomologist to pin a lawyer down on that one. So anyways, thanks.
I'm glad I've provided some fun at the end of the day. We have like 6 minutes left to the public comment session. We can also take a 5-minute break if folks want before we start the public comments. I think we've got a good list here. Thanks, Jeffrey, for taking notes. All right. Mark, I'm going to assume that's a legacy hand. Yep. Saw that go down. Thanks. All right. Going once. Going twice. 3 times. All right. Gavel is down, and we'll conclude the comments. Thanks again to all our presenters. Thanks again to everyone on the committee who's taken time out of your busy work days and lives, and also, personal life issues that are that you guys are dealing with, and to support OPP with your comments, your passionate comments, your desire for us to do better with regard to supporting the American people, public health, the environment, and making sure we're following the science and following the law and doing our jobs to the best of our abilities here with the statutes we've been presented to implement. So I do appreciate all the conversation that happened today and for your remarks. And we'll conclude with public comments and then adjourn for the day. 5:15 to 5:30. Jeffrey, you want us back at 5:15? And also, I should ask, maybe has anybody signed up to provide public comments, Jeffrey, such that we need that session?
Yes, we have a lot of people who signed up. We won't
All
go
right.
to all of them, but
Okay. What would you like to do? Do you want to start now? Do you want a 4-minute break?
no, I think we can just start now. Does
Okay.
that work?
It's 5:11, so we're 4 minutes early. I'll let you manage the public comments, and then we will adjourn.
Thank you, Ed.
And how long folks have to speak. I'll let you talk about that.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yep. So closing out the meet. Oh, give me a second. So closing out the meeting, we will move on to public comments. Please raise your hand if you registered to provide comments and are ready to speak. I will promote you to speaking status, and which will allow you to unmute your line. Please wait until I call on you, going in order of those listed on the screen first, to turn on your mic, then deliver your remarks slowly and clearly. We will go in the order of which we received registration. Please note we might not get through this entire list. We appreciate everyone's interest. When you're making your comment, please state your name and affiliation. If you have one, we ask that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes. I will show a slide when you have 30 seconds left. Again, please keep your remarks within the maximum time allowed. Yes, so we can get started. Let me share this. We'll go with David Ingram first. Are you here? David, let's see. Not seeing David here. Peter Diaz? Nope. Marguerite Frazier? Robert LaFrance? No, not seeing him. Laura Campbell? Carolyn Lang? No. Verna Stilwa? No. Bill Jordan? Bill, you're welcome to speak.
Very much. I'm Bill Jordan. I am a volunteer with the Environmental Protection Network. That's an organization of over 600 former EPA people who support the agency in carrying out its mission. The times are difficult for federal employees, and as former EPA folks, we know that it's challenging for all of the staff, and so it's particularly impressive to see all the accomplishments that the folks in the Office of Pesticide Programs have done over the last 6 months. And we offer our appreciation for the hard work, the dedication that you have to protecting public health and the environment. But one of the things that's also clear is that you need more resources in order to be able to do everything that you're required to do under the statute. that you administer. And Joe Privach slide shows how woefully short OPP's resources fall in terms of what was expected, promised, and what you need. I understand the interest in the current administration on reducing the backlog and getting out registrations and improving new active ingredients. But like several of the members of the PPDC, I want to stress that the work of reviewing, reevaluating old pesticides is as important, if not more so, than getting new products into the market. More Me Too's don't really make that much of a difference. And so we'll be watching and hoping that you continue the progress and focus particularly on getting final decisions made, because unless all the good scientific work you do is translated into regulatory changes, then it doesn't make that much difference. In terms of the work group presentations, I really want to compliment and thank Lisa and Sarah and Michelle for their leadership on the label reform work group, but the subsequent presentations have pointed out that there's still a lot of additional work that needs to be done with regard to labeling. Stanley Culpepper and Bill Chisholm's presentations on improving the structured labeling is stuff that should be carried through even further. And the whole effort on endangered species emphasizes the need for much better work in the area of creating electronic labels that people in the field can access. And so I encourage the cross-sector work group and the new labeling work group to focus on those things and look for partnerships that may be able to enable those things to come about more quickly than just relying on EPA's efforts with its limited, strapped, inadequate resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Nita, I see you here.
Hi, my name is Mizu Honita. I'm a associate professor and extension specialist at the Virginia Tech. But really great that I was able to join this discussion. I learned quite a bit. I think the bill pointed out pretty much all I wanted to say. So basically, I really support the effort of making that the label restructured so that we can understand what's going on. And then I'm 100% behind on that making everything available online. Right now, there are a couple of different pesticide databases run by a third party, and we have to rely on that sometimes. So it would be great to have that the EPA to organize the current label so that we can access it to the current information. And then I totally also agree with what Bill's comment about the older or registered materials. So many growers rely on it. And I know there were lots of discussion on relabeling and discussion on it. But yeah, if you could keep good work on open up for the public comment and then get people's opinion on it, that'd be wonderful. And then I think that's about it.
Thank you. I don't see the next two people online. So Brett Grousel, sorry if I butcher your name. Give me a second. I see you here. Brett, you can speak.
Yes, Brett Holtz. I'm a farmer from north central Kansas, south central Nebraska. Been following the PPDC here for the last 2 years, and I want to commend the work that you all are doing and everything for the better of our environment all around. I just want to give a couple of things from a farmer grower perspective. The label reform that you guys are working on, it sounds very promising, very great. It's going to be very nice when there's a consistent level across all labels. And as a grower getting ready to mix that chemistry to put on my field, I know I can go to section 3.1 or whatever it is and know my rates, know my active ingredients, know my pound conservations. It just makes life a lot easier, a lot less math mistakes that possibly could happen. And because once we have a window to spray, to actually get in the fields and put the small amounts on that we do, it's go time. So that label reform, getting a consistent label across everything, it's going to be substantially beneficial in the actual field. As we look at the ESA, the training, the education portion into the field, I commend you guys for working on that. And I can see that as an issue going forward. Out here in Kansas and southern Nebraska, we have a very high turnover rate in our extension agencies, in our crop scouts, etc. So getting that training across to those individuals to get it to the field is going to be a challenge I could see as we move forward with this, just to get the proper information out there. I want to talk about a little bit on the technology side. As I sit in my office here, I write my prescriptions that I send to my sprayer that I run myself into the field. I was looking earlier today, I did less than 0.5% lap over on all my acres, a little over 1,400 acres. I did less than 0.5% lap over on those. So as we continue to move forward in our technology that we have on our farm operations, we're going to see that get better and better. Our nozzling, our see and spray, our mixing that we use our semis and everything to mix before we put it in the sprayer. We're really coming forward technology wise. And the last thing I want to say is we are, as growers and producers, we are investing a lot of our own dollars into getting that technology because we do see the need and the requirements to continue the great stewardship of our ground that we have been doing with no-till, with stabilizers, with the adjuvants, and with products like Lockdown and Boneyard. So again, I respect everybody's opinions and respect the work that you guys are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person, Richard Brain. I see you here.
Yeah, I'm here, Jeffrey. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thanks. This is Richard Brain. I'm a toxicologist with Syngenta Crop Protection. I just wanted to offer sort of an open question to the agency regarding stakeholder engagement and support, as there seems to be a prevailing popular narrative framing the interaction between EPA and registrants as one of collusion and coercion rather than collaboration. And so I'm curious what we can do with respect to transparency and process to improve this dynamic/perception. Thanks.
Thank you. Next person, Bernadette. You're welcome to speak.
Yes, thank you. I'm Bernadette Pager, Stand for Health Freedom. Industry has spent decades convincing the world that donning hazmat suits to spray crops with toxic chemicals makes sense. It does not. What is needed is a paradigm shift where the goal of the EPA is to reduce the number of pesticides registered and used and increase the number of farms that thrive without synthetic chemicals using regenerative and organic practices. Technology can help with the transition, such like precision tractors that spot spray with steam instead of poison. Modern science and technology can be harnessed that respects the complex brilliance of nature and the soil. EPA, I'd love to see you using your power and resources for good. Product users are misled when they see no cancer or reproductive risk or neurological warnings on the label. They take it to mean those risks don't exist, when in fact, for full product or combined exposures, those studies are not required by the EPA. Also not required on the label are findings suggestive of harm or known harm if exposure levels are higher than EPA used in their estimations of expected exposures. But farm workers, landscapers, maintenance workers, homeowners are exposed to full product formulas and combined active ingredients regularly, as well as contamination in their food and water. Bayer is currently going to state legislatures attempting to turn EPA labels into liability shields. New labels will not protect consumers from misbranding or fraud. New labels won't protect consumers or farm workers who are exposed daily to an ever-increasing number of pesticides. State misbranding laws are an essential part of the feedback loop once a pesticide is on the market. We hope the EPA will support consumer protection and oppose Bayer's attempts to use EPA labels as liability shields. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat Bishop, I see you here. You're welcome to talk. Pat, can you hear us? You're unmuted. Okay. Jen, you are welcome to speak.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I'm Jennifer Malacarney. I'm the Land Trust Director for OCA Incorporated in the Kaskaskia watershed of Southwest Illinois, 7,000 acres of the largest unbroken hardwoods bottomland timber in the state. And this timber has been tested for 7 years with herbicide damage. Especially we're losing the white oaks and a lot of the post oaks, most of the black oaks, basically all the oaks, the best timber, the best lumber that this state has to offer. We've been reporting this to the EPA and Department of Ag for 8 years. We get no traction at all. We keep mentioning vapor drift. I would like to see vapor drift mentioned in your reports because buffers will not manage vapor drift. Only retooling of the actual herbicides could manage that. Also, I was hoping that your report would mention what some of your public have just mentioned about the spot sprayers that are available with various types of weed control other than chemical, and even the John Deere See & Spray and a couple of other companies that have a method of using herbicides that are controlled and restricted and very poisonous only on those weeds that are resistant to herbicide. So we could cut back right now and we could control some of this vapor drift that's basically been documented since 1950. And we know it certainly was occurring in Vietnam when 2,4-D was used there. And we know that dicamba is doing the same thing. The vapor is moving over a mile and still killing trees. So I appreciate all this group has done. I just hope they can do more.
Thank you. Zan Honeycutt, believe
Yes,
you're unmuted. Yes.
yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Zen Honeycutt. I'm the founding executive director of Moms Across America, and we have millions of mothers across the country and around the world also that are calling on the EPA to do their job with in respect to protecting our families from potential risks from pesticides using sound science. And these are words directly driven from your mission. And sound science would mean including the 67 studies that the IARC used to determine that glyphosate was genotoxic that the EPA ignored. So my first request is, will you please go back to the drawing board and review those 67 studies? In addition, review the new study that shows that glyphosate causes glyphosate and glyphosate-based herbicides at levels lower than what the EU allows, their allowable daily intake, which is twice as low as the United States. Ours is twice as high. That glyphosate at those levels causes over 15 different cancers. And this was 1,600 rats, and it was conclusive that glyphosate and glyphosate-based herbicides cause cancer. So why the EPA would allow glyphosate to be used for even one more day means that you are not doing your jobs. Your job is to protect our families, not the profits of the corporations. In addition, glyphosate exposure, only 1/40th of the exposure of glyphosate, that's drift level only, causes the reduction of nutrients in the crop by 80 to 95%. This data comes from Ag Advisory, Michael McNeil. That means that our farmers are growing nutrient deficient junk food if there's even a glyphosate drift in their area onto their crop. And those nutrients that were tested were magnesium, zinc, and iron. Those are the nutrients that are the stronghold of the immune system. The immune system can't function without those for the plant, for our livestock, and for human health. So this means that our livestock are getting sicker, and we have to cull them when we have losses, which causes loss for farmers. And humans are getting sicker at rates like never before. Mycotoxins and bacteria are causing us to get sick, and we need to ban the 85 pesticides that have already been banned in other countries. New labels will only make sense if they tell the truth. They must tell the truth that these pesticides are causing cancer, miscarriages, loss of our precious babies, and harming our loved ones. So I'm charging you to tell the truth on these labels of what these pesticides are doing, because there's no free market and there's no healthy growing of food unless the farmers are educated on what these pesticides are actually doing to their soils, to their farm workers, to their families, and to their loved ones and their customers. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I would like to allow just one more comment, and that it'll be our final one. And you can email me here, as you can see down here, chang.jeffrey@epa.gov. Chef Kelly, I see you're here. Final comment. Chef Kelly? Hello?
Oh, here you go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
That's better.
Yep, final
Okay, I
comment.
want to thank Zen Honeycutt. I'm a member of Moms Across America too, but most importantly, I am a corporate chef, 20 years in the industry and 15 years with Big Food. Last week, when the report came out about glyphosate, I had never seen such outrage from my industry, a sense of betrayal. Personally, I cried because I felt that we had won, but I cried because there was a huge sense of loss. Us being right is not vindicating. Us being right is proving that our farmers, our earth, our species, our endangered species, have all been suffering greatly at the hand of one company. And I just want to know this. As someone else earlier tonight or today talked about how there needs to be a unified message from the EPA moving forward across the entire agency, I hope that you can give us a sense of what you will do regarding the license that you rescinded from Bayer in order to do more testing, and what the industries or the organization's complete message is about moving forward with Bayer and glyphosate.
Thank you, Chef Kelly. That is it for today. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get to everyone. We appreciate everyone's interest, and please keep your interest up. Ed, would you like to close us out?
Sure. Thank you. Sorry, I'm trying to turn my video on. About how many folks did we have left, Jeffrey, that didn't get to talk? Because I'm fine going another, 5 or 10 minutes to let folks
Okay, give me
continue
a
to talk.
second. I think we had just a few more, like maybe just a handful. I know Patricia was here.
Yeah. So why don't we let, if it's 4 or 5, then
Okay.
let's let the 4 or 5
Yep.
get their time. And thanks I probably won't do any closing remarks after, but I am here listening to the comments, and I'll stay, for the next, I would say 10 or 15 minutes while folks get to make the comments, these important comments.
Yep. Pat, can you hear us? You're showing up, but we can't hear you. So how about Renee Zanella? Give me a second. Can you speak?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Hello, my name is Renee Zanella. I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm an Iowa native, working full-time as an artist and transformational coach. My husband and I moved out to a small acreage in rural Iowa in 2018, where we were working to build a small farm when I started noticing the rhythms of the farmers and the stuff they're spraying. I'm here today not just as an artist or a coach, but as a wife, a mother, a daughter, a niece, a cousin, a sister, and a concerned citizen. My mother passed away from stage 4 cervical cancer 2 days before Thanksgiving in 2023. She ate corn her entire life, and we were told what was being sprayed on it was safe. My uncle is a lifelong farmer who is currently battling cancer, who lives in Iowa as well, who also lost his brother to cancer the same year as my mother. And his son is now also has a rapid growing tumor. My aunt, who also is a farmer up in North Iowa, is also fighting cancer as we speak for a third time down in Arizona. They all live in Iowa. This isn't just a statistic to me. It's personal, it's generational, and it's heartbreaking. These chemicals don't stay in the fields. They end up in the air, the water, the animals, and in our bodies. They're killing not just pests, but pollinators, microbes in the soil, and people we love. I believe we're called to speak up for those who can't speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Proverbs 31:8. That includes our children, our farmers, our communities, the land, air, water, and even the bees. Please, I urge you to listen, rethink, reform. We can do better. We must do better. We need to ban all these toxic chemicals and help farmers transition into organic regenerative farming practices before it's too late. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Sarah St. Germain?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, I am a concerned mother and entrepreneur. And I just wanted to say that glyphosate is the most widely used herbicide on conventional farms, and it's also used beyond agriculture, including private, public, and commercial purposes. This means a very large part of the population is exposed. It gets into our bodies through the food we eat, the water we drink, the air we breathe. Studies show that it causes cancer, has adverse effects on development, hormonal systems, and human reproduction. It induces oxidative stress, causes neural inflammation and mitochondrial dysfunction, and even has transgenerational health effects. In 2018, 3 years after Bayer bought Monsanto, Bayer set aside over $16 billion to cover litigation liability associated with thousands of US lawsuits alleging Monsanto's glyphosate-based herbicides, such as Roundup, cause non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. After losing 3 out of 3 trials in cases brought against Monsanto by cancer victims, Bayer said in June 2020 that it would pay more than $10 billion to settle roughly 100,000 of the claims. In late July 2021, they said it would set aside another $4.5 billion to cover Roundup cancer claims. The company also said it would stop selling Roundup and other glyphosate-based herbicides to U.S. customers by 2023, but it would continue to keep selling these products to commercial applicators and farmers. Well, it's now 2025, and this morning I went on the Home Depot website and found 22 different versions of Roundup for sale. This is not okay. It's your job to protect us and the environment. This company is corrupt. This company does not care about human health or the environment. They need to be held accountable. The Rodale Institute has been running a farming systems trial since 1981. They document the impacts of organic versus conventional farming. The farming systems trial team has been gathering a wide variety of data from the research plots for more than 40 years and thoroughly analyzing using rigorous scientific standards. The results indicate that organic farming systems match or outperform conventional production and yield while providing a range of agronomic, economic, and environmental benefits for farmers, consumers, and society. The research shows organic practices increase soil organic matter, microbial biomass, diversity, and activity while reducing soil compaction. 30% higher yields during times of extreme weather. Organic yields match conventional yields for cash crops such as corn and soybean. Organic management increases water infiltration and does not contribute to the accumulation of toxins in waterways. Even without the premiums paid for organic crops, the organic manure system is the most profitable system. Organic system operation cost is significantly lower than conventional management. Soil is the foundation to food production and growing healthy, nutrient-rich food to sustain a growing population. Healthy soil holds moisture until plants need it and creates symbiosis with fungi to extend the root work deeper into the soil. Erosion prevention. The aggregates in healthy soil stick together and don't wash or blow away. These are all the reasons why the healthy soil is so important. Disease defense, active soil microbes ward off plant diseases, flood resistance. Healthy soil absorbs more water at a faster rate, reducing flood and runoff. Carbon capture, healthy soil holds carbon and keeps it out of the atmosphere. We need healthy soil. We need a healthy planet. Without it, we're done as a species. I have a 7-year-old son. Why are we poisoning our children? Please do something about this. You have the power to do something about this. Use your power for the greater good of all. Thank you.
Thank you. One final person I see here. M.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Monica Marino. I am speaking today as a child of Earth. Our time here on this planet is a gift to us, and not one of us will outlive this Earth. And as good stewards, leaving it better than we arrived is something to aim for. Spraying our skies, food, and land with pesticides is known to cause harm to us, our animals, water sources, and our neighbors. A handful of major corporations dominate the pesticide market, selling an estimated $60 billion of product per year. These companies not only produce pesticides, they are involved in the development and sale of genetically modified seeds. The DNA of nature is altered to create a resistance and tolerance to their chemicals sprayed on the crops. A handful of these corporations, including Bayer, who holds a 25% share of the market, also produce pharmaceuticals which are used to treat diseases that are preventable by stopping the use of the very products they sell. This is a clear and blatant conflict of interest, and it is clear here the motive behind these corporations is profit. The EPA must stop the approval of pesticide chemicals that do what they're sold to do, kill. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I believe that's it for today.
Thanks. It looks like we were able to get to all the comments, Jeffrey.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for attending. Thanks for your passion. Thanks for caring about the things we're doing here and the science we're doing within OPP. And look forward to having a future session in November. And good luck to the work groups for addressing the charge questions that were presented today. So thanks everyone for attending, and thanks for staying over for a little bit so we could hear and provide public comment.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Thanks, Jeffrey, to you.
Bye.